Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here to give you guys my Movie Monday review series. And today I'm going to be reviewing Unbreakable. The reason I'm doing this, obviously, is because Glass came out last Friday, and I plan on seeing Glass at some point. I'm possibly going to see it this week. So I want to watch, the whole trilogy of movies. I want to watch this one, then I want to watch Split, then I'm going to obviously watch Glass because that's the last of the trilogy. And I'm not going to review Split because I already have a review of Split on this channel. So it really wouldn't make sense to do it again. I guess it would, though, because I would get the ending more, obviously. Because, obviously, there's an ending that has to do with Unbreakable in that film. So I guess I could do it. I probably would understand it a little bit more than I did back then. But I'm just going to kind of hold off and not really do a review. It's just really pointless. But I am here to give you guys the Unbreakable review. I wanted to have had this up earlier, but I just had so much other things going on that I finally did watch it today because it was kind of like a lame duck day, because I don't know why I said lame duck day. It's not a president, but it was kind of like a do nothing day since we just had like a snowstorm and stuff. So I figured I would watch this film, and I gotta say, I really did enjoy this film. I don't know if I enjoyed this more than Split, because it's also been 3 years since I've seen Split, so I would have to kind of watch it. I'm probably going to watch Split tomorrow, and I'll let you guys know. But this definitely I thought was a great film, and I'll talk about why I thought it was a great film as I review the film. But let's just get right into this film. This film was directed by M. Night Shyamalan. He also produced the film. The film was produced by him, and he also wrote the film. So he pretty much was very heavily involved in this film. He also acted in the film as well. And obviously, M. Night Shyamalan's very well known now. Some people like him, some people hate him. He was making some really good films at this time. He was making. I just want to make sure I get the name of the films right. I haven't seen some of these films, but he was making He had made The Sixth Sense. A year later, 2 years later, in 2002, he would make Signs, and then he'd make The Village in 2004. He would make The Happening in 2008. But obviously, he's had some stinkers. He recently in 2010, he made The Last Airbender, which I have never fully sat through and watched that full movie because it just starts off bad, and it just really don't have an interest in watching it. 2015 he made The Visit, and then obviously 2016 he made Split, and then this year he just made Glass. So some people don't like M. Night Shyamalan because he's made some really, really bad films, but some people really like him because he's made films like this. I feel like, once again, he's starting to become, very well liked because of his recent works with The Visit, Split, and now, I don't know about Glass because I haven't seen it yet, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, he directed, produced, and wrote this film. But other people that produced this film was Sam Mercer and Barry Mendel. I'm not going to say other things that they've done because you can just easily look that up for yourselves. And yeah, that's pretty much that. Then we had the the music done by James Newton Howard, which I thought he did a very good job with that. We had the cinematography done by Adoro Ciara. This film was edited by Dylan Tickener. I don't know if that's how you say his last name, but that's what I'm going to go with. And the production company that produced this film was Touchstone Pictures, Blind and Edge Pictures, and Barry Mendel Productions Limited, and as well as Limited Edition and Productions Inc. And this was distributed by Buena Vista Pictures. Don't think that's how you say that at all, but I did my best. And this film was released on November 22nd, 2000. And the film had a budget of $75 million. And because I've reviewed foreign films before, this film is the language in this film is English, so there's that. So this film had a lot of money going into it, so obviously we were wondering if it was gonna deliver. But how this movie ended up becoming a thing, well, it's a very easy answer. He came up with this idea when he was filming The Sixth Sense, and with the way this film is presented, I think M. Night Shyamalan was kind of interested in the idea of bringing the comics kind of into real life. He kind of wanted to explore that, like what makes the hero in the comics the heroes, the villain the villain. This pretty much was his way of kind of experiencing that, and I thought that was pretty cool. And you have, he had already been working with Bruce Willis, who was, who was in The Sixth Sense, and eventually he wanted to have Samuel L. Jackson, and Samuel L. Jackson, and Bruce Willis had worked on projects together before. His filmography is, well, he has a lot of stuff. I'll just, he's done, he had done Jurassic Park. He had done, I should have looked this up ahead of time, but I forgot. Rules of Engagement, The Negotiator. I had to make sure I got that right. Sphere, Out of Sight, and The Great White Hype, and obviously Die Hard with a Vengeance, which I believe him and Bruce Willis both starred in together, so they had already known each other. So then Bruce Willis had come up with them with this project, and they decided to go with it. Samuel L. Jackson obviously said yes. And obviously because of the success, both financially and critically, of The Sixth Sense in August 1999, he had originally wanted to give this to Walt Disney Studios to probably, purchase the film. But I don't exactly know what happened, because as we see that they didn't end up producing the film, something must have went wrong. So then obviously this, I think because, instead, Disney, I guess Disney still did produce the film, because it does say Disney decided to release Unbreakable, under their Touchstone Pictures banner. So, they also, and then obviously Shyamalan established his own production company, was his Blind and Edge Pictures. I believe this is right around the time he had come up with that. And obviously they talked about how they kind of wanted to make this feel like it was a comic book come to life, because of the way that the camera angles were shot and stuff. They wanted to make you feel like that. They gave Samuel L. Jackson the wig to make him look like Frederick Douglass, which he definitely has that Frederick Douglass vibe about him. M. Night Shyamalan even makes a cameo appearance himself. I'll kind of get into that, later on in the film. And that's pretty much kind of like the breakdown of this film. There's things like how Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson met, but that's really not important. But yeah, because they were able to get Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis because they had done past films in the past. But I pretty much kind of broke down kind of how this film was made, which, is a pretty interesting story. But let's talk about the actual film itself. It's really, I'm not going to mention this film really chronologically, because I feel like the review would be very sloppy. So I'm just gonna kind of, talk about the film. I'm just gonna start off with because it shows a scene in the past, but I'm not gonna mention that yet until Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis meet in person. We start off in the present, in Philadelphia, I'm just going to imagine that the year was 2000 since this movie came out in 2000. We meet the main character who's played by Bruce Willis, David Dunn, and he's on a train, and he's coming home from an interview because he just went to get a job interview, and this woman sits next to him. And one thing I gotta say I did love about this film is the camera work in this film. How they wouldn't exactly, they would do things like having cameras look through the seats of the plane. They would do a scene later on with David Dunn and his son, where he would grab the orange juice and it looked like the camera was on the orange juice. They would kind of film angles far away. I thought it was just done very well. I know that seemed like a very corny joke, but the pun was unintended. But he's talking to this girl who sits down next to him. He takes his wedding ring off, so I think we were supposed to have assumed that he was going to cheat on his wife, but there's more reasons behind that that we find out later on in the film. And he's talking to her. We find out that she's like a sports reporter and all that, and he tries to hit on her, but then she reveals that she's married, so she ends up moving her seat. We see this kid kind of looking into David Dunn, and I think that was supposed to be significant about something. And, David is kind of pandering off into the train. So then what happens is I actually liked how they shot to the next scene where you see David Dunn's son, Joseph. I had to make sure I remembered his name. Like watching TV, flicking through the channels, and he just happens to see that the train that his father was on crashed. And he even had to go look, because I think on the bulletin board it was written that he was on, because they said like the number of the train that he was on, and he was just happened to be on that train. But then he goes to the doctor's office. The doctor asks him typical questions you would probably get asked in a doctor's office after you've been like in a severe accident and stuff. I guess I should have said the emergency room. And we find out though that David Dunn received no scratches. He's pretty much walked out of this train crash unscathed. We find out that it had like a collision. And nobody in like his section survived the train crash. But he did somehow, and obviously that's very remarkable, and very interesting. I think that was a hell of a way to kind of kick off the film, and obviously just very weird. So we knew instantly that something was up. Because he was the only survivor. There was somebody else that survived, but they were just so severely injured and stuff that they just died because of the injuries. But I liked the way they, shot that. And like I said, I liked the way the camera work was done, where it was showing somebody else that had obviously been in this train accident, like injured, and he's all fine and stuff like that. So I liked that. And he goes out and rekindles with his family. And one thing I liked about this is they gave you the vibe. They didn't openly tell you that they weren't getting along, but M. Night Shyamalan did things by, kind of having Andre, which is David's wife, and David, since they really aren't seeing eye to eye, I think they were very close to getting a divorce, but they didn't want to do it because of Joseph. They wanted to keep the family together. So, but you can see like they don't sleep in the same rooms. David would sleep with Joseph most of the time, and you could just definitely see that David himself was just going to move to New York and get the interview, but he says he doesn't think that he got the interview. And this is when you get to kind of find out more stuff about David. We find out that he's a security guard at a university, and I forget the name of the university. I think it's one in Philadelphia, obviously. he's a security guard for football games. And we see, though, that someone left a note in David's windshield, and it said, "Have you ever been sick?" And obviously, we were supposed to have been kind of questioning about that. So then he goes and asks the secretary to ask his boss about that, and his boss just assumed that he wanted a raise, so he gave him like a $40 raise since he never took a sick day. So then he goes to ask Andre about it, and Andre says that she doesn't recall a time she's ever been sick. So David thinks that this is suspicious. And we find out that he got this note from Limited Edition, which is an art gallery run by Samuel L. Jackson, who plays Elijah Price in the film. Now, in the beginning portions of the film, we got to find out the character background of Elijah Price, and we right when the film started, we got to see him born, and I liked how they did this where they showed it in the mirror. Like I said, nice little neat camera trick right here, and we find out that Elijah Price has type I, osteogenesis imperfecta, which pretty much is a rare disease where where his bones are extremely fragile and he can just, break bones really easily. I think he said he had like 54 broken bones in his life, because he was born right when he was, because he had 2 broken arms and 2 broken legs right when he was born, and it shows him sitting in his room and he's too afraid to go out there because he doesn't want to he doesn't want to break his bones. And it didn't show him it showed him his picture like in the TV. So his mom reveals that, which I don't think we ever find out her name. It's just Mrs. Price. Says that God has this on you for a reason, and it hurts her to see him all depressed, not really socializing with anybody. And people in high school used to call him Mr. Glass because he would be very fragile, like the glass in the windows at the school. And I think he was like in 7th grade at this time. So his mom tells him that Mrs. Price tells him that she got him a gift, and the gift that she ended up getting him is on the bench across the street. And obviously she did this so that way he would go outside. And Elijah opens the gift, revealing it to be a comic book. And this kind of like sets the tone, because this is kind of like what his obsession is in the film, is he likes comics. And she talks about all the hidden meanings in comics, all with between heroes and villains, and says that if he goes outside a lot more, there'll be a lot more comic books for him. And obviously this kind of set the tone for Elijah's character throughout the rest of the film, because then the next day someone's trying to buy Elijah's artwork, thinking, and is just going to buy it for his son. And Elijah gets upset about this because he's claiming that to that customer, the artwork is just like buying a toy, when it's not. It's real art. So he kicks him out, and David Dunn and Joseph go to the art store, which is called Limited. I believe it's called Limited Works. Limited Edition. Because obviously it's called Limited Edition because you're probably not going to find a lot of these artworks that he's making. And he tells them that, he knows that he got, that he sent out the letter or the note on his windshield. So Elijah reveals that he's interested in seeing what makes a hero, what powers they possess, because he thinks that like that the heroes in the comic books can become reality. That we're all just kind of in a way living in a comic book, except it's more real in the real world than a comic book. Because that's kind of what this whole film's about. It's trying to paint a picture of a comic book using the real world, which I think is very unique. I don't think it's something that had ever been done before. You know, that wasn't like a Batman movie or Superman movie. You got to actually see like a real person go through this type of stuff. So then what happens is Elijah reveals all this stuff that's like drastic stuff that's taken place where people, you know, have been burnt in hotels. People have been, like, all this drastic stuff that's happened. Like, planes have exploded. And I was thinking it was a 9/11 reference, but since this movie was made in 2000, 9/11 hadn't happened yet, so that reference wouldn't have made sense at all to make. Wouldn't even been a reference. But no one survived. But somehow you survived the train incident and came out unharmed. And he wants to know how that's possible. And he also asked him the last time he's been sick, if he's ever been injured. And David reveals that he's 75% sure that he hasn't been sick, but says that he has been injured before. And Joseph tells him this. We find out that David was a really good football player, and David, you know, had a really promising career doing that, and he could have had a great life, but a car accident took him out of commission, and he had to stop playing football because of his injuries. So he sends his son out so that way he can pretty much tell Elijah to kind of get out of his life. He feels like the only reason Elijah's doing this is because he wants to kind of scam him and try to get like his credit card information. But you know, Elijah tries to ask him what he does for work, but David doesn't answer him. And throughout like the rest of the film, you get to kind of see that David still kind of is feeling a little, has some special powers. David somehow is able to kind of sense things about people based on touch, which is very interesting. Because Elijah, you know, follows him to a sports game, and you know, they start having a conversation, and he's intrigued about why David chose to be a security guard to protect people versus, you know, since he graduated college, he could have literally done anything else with his life. And David really doesn't give him much of an answer. And David kind of starts to sense that there's something going on with someone wearing camouflage. That he touches him, and he has a feeling that he's very suspicious, so he has everybody kind of get patted down. And of course the guy in the camouflage goes away, and Elijah reveals that Elijah is very suspicious about this, wants to know like how he was you know, knew that that guy was carrying some suspicious item, and he wants to know like what he thought he was carrying. And he says a gun. He says a certain type of gun too, and David reveals how him and his wife got together, and about his car accident some more. And I liked this because obviously I like too how the camera panned away from it, but obviously it gave you more of a sense about their characters. So what ended up happening is later on in the film, Elijah is getting into his car to leave. He sees that he sees the guy in the camouflage, and he follows him so he could see what he was carrying for a gun. But the guy runs away from him, and I thought like the guy was going to come out later and kill him or something, but what ends up happening is Elijah has to take these flights of stairs, and he falls down the stairs, and he had this glass cane that ended up breaking, and he breaks his bones, and we find out that he's going to be out of commission. He's pretty much going to be banged up. He's got to go through physical therapy and stuff, and he tells the doctor that people call me Mr. Glass, and that's kind of the first time we had really heard about that. So what ends up happening is he meets Andre for a physical therapy session, who we find out that she's a nurse, and he wants to know like her side of the story, and she reveals that she doesn't really like football. She talks about how she doesn't like the injuries that the athletes put themselves through to win the game, and she reveals that after the car accident, that's how her and David got together. Because had that car accident not happened, her and David probably wouldn't be together right now. So what ends up happening is Elijah has a feeling that David faked his injuries so that way he could be with his wife. David doesn't really agree to this, so he just thinks it just happened to be a lucky guess that he guessed the guy had a gun, and that he really did get hurt, because he revealed that he's been sick before, because we'd find out later on in the film, I think it was earlier in the film at this point, that him and his son had gotten into a fight, so David had to go pick him up, and we find the school nurse had talked about how David drowned after being underwater for 5 minutes and nearly had a near-death experience. And we find out David got pneumonia from it and had nearly died. And earlier in the film, on the train, David did say that he wanted to be a swimmer, a synchronized swimmer, but is afraid of water. And obviously we didn't know why he was afraid of water, but now we find out why he is afraid of water. So I thought that kind of did a very good job of painting that picture, because then we find out later on about all this stuff. And then what happens is we kind of see that David is not human. And one little thing they did to kind of touch upon this is David goes to pick up his son, Joseph, and Joseph was playing football, which his mother wouldn't be a fan of, and so that was a good job of painting that picture, because we didn't really know why Andre didn't like football, and now we found out why. And Joseph helps David work out, and pretty much he can lift up to 350 pounds. Joseph continuously adds weight, and it gets to the point where they don't actually have any physical weight, so he adds buckets to them. But I thought this was really good. It was a very small way to kind of show, actually a pretty big way to show that like maybe David's more than human. Maybe David has some type of like a superhero, supernatural type of feel to him. So I thought this was awesome. You get to kind of see too that David had some other sense, and this is when he meets M. Night Shyamalan face to face as the drug dealer, where David had a sense that he was dealing drugs but doesn't actually find anything, and then this is when that whole scene happens when he goes to talk to the school nurse, because you could see that he can't really sense things in the past that are happening currently, but he can kind of sense if someone's doing something bad. He has a good sense about bad activity, but just based on touch. He even touches this mother and son, which obviously that's been like a big fan theory that's possibly Kevin Crambell, I think that's how you say, Kevin Wendell Crumb, from Split, the main villain, and his mom. But we don't really know if that was theories are true or not. Like I said, they could just be fan theories. Maybe they'll actually address it in Glass. I'm not sure. But that's actually a pretty cool theory. So then what happens is David and what ends up happening is you know obviously Andre's not happy that Mr. Glass showed up at her work, and what ends up happening is to prove whether or not David can't get hurt, his son takes a gun, and we find out that David hid this gun in his room and hid the bullets in his trophy, and his son threatened to shoot David. And obviously this is a very intense scene because Andre and David are very nervous because obviously they think that they can get hurt. And David does everything he can to kind of try to talk Joseph out of it. And this was a very intense scene. I thought this scene was shot real well. The camera work was done real well, and I just thought it was done really well. So David reveals, David pretty much gets his son to finally lower the gun when he says that he's going to leave for New York. And obviously his son doesn't end up doing it, but I thought it was a very good scene. I thought it was like one of my favorite scenes of the whole film. And then what happens is, they pretty much threaten to call the police if Elijah ever associates with them ever again. So David and Andre decide to start over. Andre comes up to David and says, him surviving that plane crash had to have happened for a reason. So they decide to start dating again, and they go out on their first date. And Andre questions whether or not David resents his life, because we find out that David has a moment of sadness every night, and that sadness possibly is that he could have had, his life could be more than what it is, since he's just a security guard. He gave up his life for Andre, and Andre kind of feels guilty about it as well. So we find out that the babysitter tells David that the person from New York called, and David ended up getting the job. So Andre says that he can leave for New York, and they can start over, have a slow burn relationship, and see if it means something. But then also Elijah calls. Elijah's in the comic book store, in his wheelchair, and the comic book clerk goes to kick him out, and Elijah is being very difficult with his wheelchair. He rolls him into the shelves of the comic book. So eventually the comic book clerk's about to call the cops, but then he sees a comic book that he wants, and I guess Officer Byatt, you don't really see anything that happens with that, because why would you just call the cops? But I'm just going to assume that Elijah, because he bought this magazine, that the comic book clerk didn't really see him as much of a threat. So Elijah revealed that the reason why David's possibly can't be around water is because that's his weakness. That's his kryptonite, which I thought was a very good reference to comic books with things like Superman and stuff like that. I thought that was awesome. So I think David starts to believe that he is more than human. That he reveals that he did fake his injuries. They even showed us the flashback of him out of the car, and he bends the metal back to pull his wife out. And had that not happened, him and his wife probably wouldn't be alive. So I actually thought that scene was done very well. And David becomes pretty much a superhero. What happens is he goes around people, and he wears his security guard outfit, and he starts to get sentences of people through touch. And it shows things like this douchebag guy drugging a woman and threatening to rape her. People getting jumped in the parking lot. But the main one that they show is there's this guy who's dressed up like a maintenance attendant, and he's gonna go and pretty much murder this guy husband and his family. And it even shows a vision of that. So David goes and saves this guy. unzip ties the son and daughter and the wife, but then eventually the maintenance guy pushes him off the balcony, and he falls into the water. And that was a pretty intense scene because obviously of everything, because he falls into like the pool. So then he gets out of the pool, and he puts the guy in like a chokehold and knocks him out. And I thought this scene was shot really well because afterwards, the maintenance guy is like trying to get David off of him by going into the wall to prevent, so that way like he'll get hurt. But obviously because David doesn't feel any pain, it doesn't affect him. So the next day, he reveals to Joseph in the paper that he actually does have powers. So Joseph is happy about this. And then the next day, David goes to Elijah's art show. And what ends up happening is he meets his mom. And, his mom reveals how she's very proud of him about everything that she's accomplished. And David and Elijah finally rekindle. And they reveal that, he says that the best type of comic book villains can mess with heroes psychologically versus actually fighting. So they decide to shake hands and become like become like a hero type of character. And what ends up happening is when he shakes his hand, we find out that Elijah caused all those murders. He caused the train to crash. He caused the burning of the hotel. And Elijah said that he did this because he wanted to find his purpose in life. And his purpose in life was trying to find the one person that has the type of powers that David has. He said that he did this, and that's how he got the nickname Mr. Glass, the nickname that children called him. I pretty much talked about it, how it was to find David. And he wants to be the villain and David's hero. But David walks away in horror and disgust. And then the film actually ends, but before that, they do like a thing like you would see like if they do like a documentary film, it reveals like what happens to everybody after the film. Well, we find out that that David ended up calling reporting Elijah to the police, and he was convicted of murder and terrorism, and he was committed to a psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane. So, and that's pretty much how the film ends. But I think I missed some things, but I pretty much covered all the big stuff that I wanted to cover. But overall, I really liked this film. I liked the story of the film. It was kind of cool to kind of see like a comic book kind of come to life in a way. It was really intriguing and just really interesting. Like I said, I like the way the camera work was done in this film. I like the characters in the films. Obviously, the main characters were David and Elijah / Mr. Glass. They really complemented each other, and I thought their characters were strong enough to kind of be together, and you could definitely see that they've worked together before with the way the characters interacted each other and stuff like that. But I also like the other storylines in this match where you wondered if David was happy with the way his life ended up, because he gave up football so that way he could be with his wife. So they kind of explored that. I kind of liked David's and Joseph's relationship that they had with each other, and just the relationship that kind of David and Andre had with each other, and just kind of seeing like just comic book come to life, I think was just really damn cool. I think it's a great film. I don't think it's like a A- film. I was even thinking about that, but there's just something that isn't there that doesn't make this an A- film. It's not a perfect film, because I think the perfect film, when you see it, you kind of don't really question whether it is the perfect film or not. But I think this is a great film. I'm going to give it a B+. I think the characters are great. I think the stories are really great. And like I said, this kind of theory of seeing like a comic book kind of come to life, I think is just kind of really cool and really complements the film really well. So I'm gonna give it a B+. I think it's a great film. But how did it do in the box office? Well, since the film came out on November 22nd, 2000, it opened to 2,708 theaters, and it grossed in its opening weekend $30.3 million, finishing second at the box office. I don't know what quite was over it. But then it ended up earning domestically $95 million, and internationally it earned $153.1 million, and it received a total of $248.1 million, which was against its $75 million production budget. So this movie like went way over its budget. It did really well in the theaters, and it was awesome. And as for what other people thought of this film, I'm going to start off with IMDb. A lot of the fans like the film. They like it for about the same reasons I do. Probably if you're a comic book fan, though, you would like it more than I did, because this is, like I said, this is like a comic book come to life. But they kind of said the same stuff I did. I think some people were disappointed with the ending because they didn't really like the twist ended and stuff. And they thought, like, you know, some of the dialogue wasn't the best. But overall, though, it got a 7.3 out of 10 on IMDb, which is pretty good. I think that's pretty okay. That's about the standard failure of how films do. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it got I have to find it actually, because I had it open, but then I was kind of clicking around. It did a 69% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is not as good, obviously, as the fans. 77% of the people liked the film. It got an average rating of 3.4 out of 5. And the average rating was a 6.3 out of 10. The reviews counted were 165. So out of 165 reviews, 114 gave it a fresh review and 51 gave it rotten. So that's about balanced out. And I think they kind of said the same thing that the fans said, but they obviously were a little bit more critical about it because it's critics. But on the metric thing, the Metascore, 18 gave it a positive review. So it got a 62 overall. 11 gave it a mixed review, and 2 gave it a negative review. And the user score, 438 people gave it a positive review. 41 gave it a mixed review, and 20 people gave it a negative review. So I got an 8.4 overall. So I think this movie, is not critically acclaimed. I don't think you're gonna find that's not critically acclaimed, but it does pass with the critics. I think the critics overall like this film, and obviously this would lead to Split eventually coming out, and obviously I'm gonna watch Split, and it is gonna be pretty cool because you get to see these characters kind of mix it up with Split and Glass, and I think that's just gonna be pretty damn cool. I'm actually really looking forward to it. Like I said, because I hadn't seen this film, the trailer of Glass, while it intrigued me, it didn't intrigue me enough because I didn't really know anything about these characters. But now seeing this film and then watching the trailer again, it really hypes me up to want to watch Glass now. And obviously now we know that Elijah is Mr. Glass. Elijah Price, I forgot his name. But that's pretty much that. Now I'll go over the cast really quick. In this film, it didn't have a lot of people in the cast because it only focused on a few characters. But like I said, Bruce Willis played David Dunn. Samuel L. Jackson played Elijah Price / Mr. Glass. Davis Duffield played David when he was like 20 years old. Johnny Herron played a 13-year-old Elijah. Sorry, Johnny Herm Jameson. I forgot to read his last name. That's pretty important. Robert Wright played Andrea Dunn. It was supposed to be somebody else, but there was scheduling conflict because she had other roles coming up. So Laura Regan, though, played 20-year-old Andre. Spencer Threat Clark played Joseph Dunn. Charlie Ann Wood, I don't know if that's how you say her last name or her name. Well, Wood, I don't know I know how to say that name, but Charlie Ann, I don't know if that's how you say that name, played Mrs. Price, which is Elijah's mother. Eamon Walker played Dr. Mathewson. I believe he's the doctor that helped give birth to Mr. Glass. I don't exactly remember. Either that or he's the doctor that checks out David after the plane incident. Leslie Stephenson played Kelly. I believe she's the person that David talks to in the beginning of the film. And Michelle Carroll played the babysitter. She didn't have a very big role at all. Whitney Sugarman played the physical therapist. Boston Christopher played the comic book clerk. Elizabeth Lawrence played the school nurse. So obviously Elizabeth Lawrence, that's a very notable name because everybody, that's a name we hear a lot in the film. Chance Kelly played Orange Shoot Man, which is the guy that David kills at towards the end of the film. Michael Kelly played Mr. Dubin, and M. Night Shyamalan is the stadium drug dealer. So yeah, that's pretty much though the end of the film. I really don't have anything else to say about it. So thank you guys for watching this film. This review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please make sure you guys like, comment, and share this video so people will watch it. Make sure you guys subscribe to this channel for more content and click on the bell so that way every time I upload a video, you guys get the notifications for it. And make sure you guys do the same thing for my CM Brothers YouTube channel. Maybe try to upload some videos on there at some point. But that's pretty much it, guys. Talk to you later.